Hi, I'm Jordan and I'm a music producer at Ameritz, and today I'll give you my top 10 tips on starting out with music production. So tip number one, it's all about equipment. So you need a good quality computer, whether it's Windows or Mac, whatever you're most comfortable with using. Two would be an interface if you're thinking about recording any instruments or vocals. You don't have to go out and spend a fortune on them. A MIDI controller, keyboard, so you can play in any instruments, choosing your DAW, which is your digital audio workstation. So for Mac, it comes with GarageBand for free, which is more than you need to start off. Windows, you can use stuff from like Fruity Loops or Reaper. Even Audacity if you're just literally recording some vocals and say guitar, for example. So tip number two would be the skills that you have already. You may end up getting some music lessons if you wanting to learn an instrument, but if you don't and you just want to fully base yourself around like electronic music or something that doesn't really involve playing an instrument, you can find loads of tutorials on YouTube. That's what I did myself. Tip number three is room treatment. So you may or may not need this straight away. If you're doing everything in your DAW, as they say in the box, and are using loads of plugins in your software, and you're mixing everything on headphones, then room treatment isn't that important right away. But then if you decide to record some vocals or some acoustic guitars or something that includes a microphone, you may want to invest in some wall panels or some like isolation booths just to reduce that echoey room noise. Yeah. So tip number four is software. So as I mentioned earlier, there's plenty of them out there, ranging from Logic, Ableton, Pro Tools, Fruity Loops, and then there's like GarageBand and Reaper. They're free, so I'd recommend starting out on one of them and get your head around them. Logic is basically the paid version of GarageBand, so you get a few more instruments, plugins and all that. But I mean, just start out with the free ones and also get some free trials of Ableton and all that, and just play around with each of them and see which one you enjoy the most. Tip number five is getting inspiration and all about being original in your music. I'd recommend starting out like just make some music that you enjoy listening to in the style of some of your favourite artists, but don't necessarily copy them exactly, because then you're basically just copying other artists. Then try and experiment with a few people that you listen to, even if they're like two different genres. Have a go at blending two genres together and making something a bit new. Tip number six is loops and samples. I wouldn't be afraid of using loops and samples. I know sometimes people judge people for using samples, saying they're not like real musicians or anything, but I mean, you can manipulate a sample in a million ways, like by taking, say, like a guitar sound, putting in a sampler, and you can warp that into, say, like a pad sound. So I'd experiment with them. You don't really need any musical knowledge. You don't need to know how to play an instrument with them. So there's a bunch of stuff out there on GarageBand, for example. They have a loop library, and you just drag a few of them in, play around with them, add some effects, and you can make some pretty interesting music. Tip number seven is less is more, and what I mean by this is sometimes you don't need to add a million guitar parts to a track or a million vocal layers. Sometimes you just need that one vocal, one guitar layer. It all depends on the style of track you're going for. So if you're doing sort of like a laid-back singer-songwriter track, you don't really want like 5 guitars being played in the background, which would be overdoing the vocal. So sometimes just strip it back, keep it simple. Tip number 8 would be to take regular breaks. you don't want to spend too long on one track. I know from personal experience, like spending too long on one, you can sort of dig yourself into a hole and you feel like the track's not going anywhere. So if that is the case, just take a break, maybe a day or two, and come back to it with a fresh set of ears, and you'll hear the track in a completely different light. Tip 9 is to get feedback. I mean, go and show all your friends, family, whatever you've produced, and see if they'll give you feedback. Now, because they're your friends and family, you might not get truly honest feedback, but you might do. But there's online platforms such as Submit Hub, where you can upload your tracks, and people across the world can give you feedback on there, so that's worth looking into if you want some more honest feedback from people who are well established in the industry. Tip number 10 would be to work with others, other music producers, musicians, and people who are more experienced with you as well. Like, if you work with people who are more experienced, they can teach you a thing or two that you might not know. And that was my top 10 tips for getting started in music production. I hope you found it helpful, and make sure to follow us on social media for more videos like this.
Perfect.
Cut.